You won't believe what she found under the mattress of her hostel bunk at 2 in the morning when she reached down to pick up her phone. She had been in that room for 6 hours. 6 hours sleeping in the dark with 7 other strangers in bunks around her, their breathing filling the room, their shapes barely visible in the darkness, their faces unknown to her in the way that the faces of people you sleep near but have never spoken to are unknown, present, close, and completely mysterious. What she found under that mattress had been there before she arrived. It had been placed there by someone who had slept in that bunk before her, and when she understood what it meant, she got up in the dark and she packed her bag in the dark and she left that hostel without turning on a single light because she did not want to see the faces of the people sleeping around her. Tonight we have 3 true hostel horror stories from travelers who checked into somewhere they thought was safe and discovered that safety is a very thin wall between you and the dark when you are sleeping in a room full of strangers in a country where nobody knows your name. These stories are dark. They are bloody. They are the kind of nightmare fuel that will make you think very carefully about every door you have ever left unlocked, every bunk you have ever climbed into without checking what was underneath it, every stranger you have ever fallen asleep next to without knowing anything about them at all. Turn your lights off, pull your covers up, and whatever you do tonight, do not look at the bunk above you. Story 1. What was under the mattress? I was 24 years old, and doing what 24-year-olds do when they have saved enough money and not enough sense. I was traveling alone through Eastern Europe on a budget that required hostels rather than hotels, shared dormitories rather than private rooms, the specific economy of someone who has decided that experience matters more than comfort and has not yet had enough experiences to understand that comfort is sometimes the thing that keeps you alive. The hostel was in a city I will not name because naming it serves no purpose except to frighten people who live there, and the city itself is not the point. The point is the room. The room is always the point in these stories. 8 bunks, 16 potential occupants. On the night I arrived there were 9 of us, myself and 8 strangers of various nationalities and various ages whose names I learned in the superficial way you learn the names of people you will share a room with for 1 or 2 nights before. You move on and they move on, and you never think of each other again. Except I think of them now. I think of them specifically and often. I think about which one of them knew what was under my mattress. I think about whether any of them had put it there. I think about whether the person who had put it there was still in that room when I found it. I found it at 2:17 in the morning. I know the time because I had woken from a dream that I could not remember and reached for my phone, which had slid off the narrow shelf beside the bunk and fallen to the floor. I leaned down over the edge of the bunk to reach it, and my hand went under the mattress instead of below it, and I felt something that was not the wooden slat of the bunk frame and not the underside of the mattress, and not anything that should have been there. I pulled it out slowly in the dark. It was a photograph, printed on regular paper the way you print something from a home computer when you want a physical copy of something digital. The photograph showed a room, a hostel dormitory room identical in layout to the one I was currently lying in. The photograph had been taken from the perspective of someone lying in a bottom bunk looking up at the bunk above them. In the bunk above the photographer there was a person sleeping. The photograph had been taken without their knowledge, the specific slightly blurred quality of an image taken in low light by someone trying not to be detected. The person sleeping in the upper bunk was a young woman, dark hair spread on the pillow, face turned slightly toward the camera, completely unaware. I looked at the photograph for a long time in the dark of the dormitory room, and then I understood something that made the air leave my lungs in a way that had nothing to do with breathing. I was in a bottom bunk. The person sleeping above me was a young woman with dark hair. I did not turn on a light. I did not look up. I got out of that bunk with the specific controlled slowness of someone who understands that the wrong movement at the wrong moment changes something irreversibly. I packed my bag in the dark by touch alone, every item found by feel, every zipper pulled slowly and carefully. I put my shoes on without sitting down, standing in the darkness of that dormitory room surrounded by the breathing of 9 strangers, and I walked to the door and I opened it and I went through it and I did not look back. I reported it to the hostel reception. a bored young man at the front desk at 2:30 in the morning who looked at the photograph and then looked at me and said he would let management know in the morning. I left the hostel and sat in a 24-hour cafe 2 blocks away until dawn. I filed a report with the local police through the Tourist Assistance Office the following morning. They took the photograph and told me they would investigate. I do not know what they found. I left the country 4 days later and I have never gone back. I think about the photograph often. I think about how many bunks it had traveled through before it reached mine. I think about the girl in the upper bunk in the photograph and whether she ever found out she had been in it. I think about the person who had taken it and hidden it under the mattress for the next occupant to find. And I think about whether that was a warning or something else entirely. What do you think the photograph was meant to communicate? And do you think the person who took it was in that room the night she found it? The hostel strips away every protection you have built around yourself in your ordinary life. Your locked door, your familiar neighborhood, the people who know where you are. The next story comes from someone who discovered exactly how thin those protections were when a locked door turned out not to be locked at all. Story 2. The door that opened. I want to tell you about the night I understood what real fear feels like. Not movie fear, not the pleasant manufactured dread of a horror film watched from a safe couch with someone beside you. Real fear, the specific biological terror of a body that has understood before the mind has caught up that something in the immediate environment is wrong in a way that has direct implications for survival. It feels like cold water poured directly into your chest. It feels like every non-essential process in your body shutting down simultaneously to redirect all available resources to the single question of what you are going to do in the next 30 seconds. It feels like clarity so sharp it is almost painful. I felt it for the first time in a hostel in Southeast Asia on a Tuesday night in August when I was 22 years old, and the door of my private room opened from the outside at 3 in the morning. I need to explain the geography of the room because it matters to everything that comes next. It was a private room, not a dormitory, a private room, which I had paid extra for specifically because I was a solo female traveler, and I had decided that the additional cost of a private room with a lockable door was worth it for the peace of mind. The room was small, a single bed against the left wall, a narrow wardrobe against the right, a window above the bed that looked out onto an interior courtyard, a door at the far end with a deadbolt that I had engaged before I went to sleep because I always engage the deadbolt before I go to sleep because engaging the deadbolt before you go to sleep in a private hostel room is the basic minimum you do when you are alone in a foreign country. I had engaged the deadbolt. At 3 in the morning I woke to the sound of the door opening. Not someone trying the door, not someone knocking, the door opening. The specific sound of a door that is no longer meeting resistance, swinging inward on its hinges with the soft mechanical certainty of a door being opened by someone who has the means to open it. I was sitting upright in the bed before I was fully conscious. The room was dark, but not completely dark. There was ambient light from the courtyard coming through the window above the bed, and it was enough to see the rectangle of the door frame, and the door swinging inward, and the shape of a person standing in the doorway. The shape did not move. It stood in the doorway, and it did not come in, and it did not speak, and it did not do anything except stand there in the darkness of the doorframe and exist in a way that was fundamentally different from any benign explanation I could generate for why a person would be standing in the open doorway of my locked private room at 3 in the morning. I screamed! Not a decision, a sound that came out of me involuntarily and completely. The specific raw sound of a body that has bypassed every social filter and is communicating something in the oldest and most direct way available to it. The shape moved backward, quickly, pulling the door with it, and I heard footsteps in the corridor outside moving away rapidly, and then the sound of a stairwell door, and then nothing. I turned on every light in the room. I pushed the narrow wardrobe against the door. I sat on the bed with my back against the wall and my phone in my hand with the emergency number already dialed and my thumb over the call button, and I did not sleep again. In the morning I reported it to the hostel management. They told me that the deadbolt on my door had a known fault, a manufacturing defect that meant it could be disengaged from the outside with a specific tool that was widely available. They told me this with the specific apologetic professionalism of people who had known about the fault for some time. They offered me a room change and a partial refund. I left the hostel within the hour. The police took a report. They reviewed the security camera footage from the corridor outside my room. The footage showed a figure in dark clothing approaching my door at 2:58 in the morning, standing at the door for approximately 40 seconds, opening it, and then leaving rapidly when I screamed. The figure's face was not visible. The figure was never identified. The hostel's CCTV showed that this was not the first time this figure had approached doors in that corridor. There were recordings from 4 previous nights showing the same figure trying doors. Mine was the first one that had opened. I think about those 4 previous nights often. I think about the people sleeping behind those doors who never knew how close the handle had come to turning. I think about what they would have done if they had woken up to what I woke up to. I think about what would have happened if I had not screamed, and I think about the 40 seconds the figure stood in my doorway before I woke up, what it was doing in those 40 seconds, what it was looking at in the darkness of that room while I slept. What do you think it was waiting for during those 40 seconds? And do you think it came back after I left? Fear is the body's oldest language, and the body speaks it most fluently when it is most alone. Our final story tonight is the darkest one, the one that ends in blood, and in the specific cold understanding that some hostels hold things in their walls that have nothing to do with plumbing or electricity. Story 3, Room 4. I am going to tell you about Room 4, not the country, not the city, not the name of the hostel. None of that matters, and none of it would help you, and I have my own reasons for not wanting to attach specific geography to what I am about to describe. What matters is Room 4, what happened in it, what I saw when I opened the door at 4 in the morning following a sound that no building makes unless something inside it has gone very badly wrong. I was working at the hostel, not staying there, working there, the way young travelers sometimes work at hostels in exchange for accommodation and a small wage, cleaning rooms and changing linen and staffing the front desk during the quiet overnight hours when the building settled into itself and the guests slept and there was very little to do except sit and exist in the particular silence of a building full of sleeping strangers. I had been working there for 6 weeks. I knew the building the way you know a place after 6 weeks of overnight shifts. Its sounds, its rhythms, the specific way it settled and creaked in the small hours, the noises that meant something and the noises that meant nothing. I was not easily alarmed by sounds in that building, which is why the sound from Room 4 at 4 in the morning alarmed me. It was a wet sound. I am going to use that description and I am not going to elaborate on it further because I think your imagination will construct something accurate enough, and because the specific quality of that sound is something I have spent 3 years trying to make less present in my memory, and describing it in detail would make it more present again. It was a wet sound, rhythmic, coming from behind the closed door of Room 4, which was a 4-bed dormitory that had been checked into that evening by 3 guests. 2 young men traveling together from Germany and a solo traveler from Australia whose name on the booking was Daniel. I knocked on the door. No response. I knocked again. Louder, the specific authoritative knock of staff rather than neighbor. Nothing. I used my master key. I am not going to describe in full what I saw when I opened the door of Room 4 because there are things that once described cannot be undescribed, and because some of what I saw that night is still part of an ongoing legal process that I am not at liberty to discuss in specific detail. What I will tell you is what the police report confirmed, because the police report is a matter of public record even if the specific details are not. One of the 3 guests in Room 4 was injured, seriously injured. The kind of injured that requires immediate emergency medical intervention and that produces the specific wet rhythmic sound that I had heard from the corridor and that I have heard in my sleep many times since that night, and that I suspect I will continue to hear for the rest of my life. The other 2 guests were gone. Their belongings were gone. The window of Room 4, which faced a narrow alley at the side of the building, was open. The police investigation determined that the injured guest had been attacked by one or both of the other occupants of the room at some point between 2 and 4 in the morning. The 2 men who had checked in together, the Germans as I thought of them, though I never knew their real names because the names on the booking were false, had not been who they said they were. The documents they had used to check in were later determined to be fraudulent. They had targeted the solo traveler deliberately. He had been selected from the hostel's online booking system before he had even arrived. His solo status, his nationality, his room assignment, all of it visible to anyone who knew how to access the system in ways they were not supposed to access it. Daniel survived. I want to tell you that because I have been building towards something very dark, and you deserve to know that the person at the center of it lived. He survived and he recovered, and I know this because I followed the case closely in the years afterward, and because knowing it helps me carry what I saw when I opened that door in a way that not knowing it would not. He survived, but he does not travel alone anymore. He does not stay in shared rooms anymore. And I do not work night shifts in buildings full of sleeping strangers anymore. I think about the booking system often, about the specific cold premeditation of two people sitting somewhere with access to a hostel's reservation database and scrolling through upcoming bookings looking for the right combination of factors: solo traveler, specific nationality, ground floor room with a window onto an alley, no one in the surrounding beds who would be likely to intervene. The patience of it, the planning of it, the fact that Daniel had been chosen before he had even packed his bag. I think about how many hostels have booking systems with the same vulnerabilities. How many solo travelers are in rooms right now whose details have already been viewed by people they have never met. And I think about the sound from behind the door of room 4 that I will never fully unhear for the rest of my life. What do you think they were looking for when they scrolled through those bookings? And how many rooms do you think they had been in before room 4? Thank you for listening. 3 stories from the hostels. 3 rooms in 3 countries where the thin wall between safety and the dark turned out to be thinner than anyone had believed when they checked in. The photograph under the mattress that meant someone had been watching before she ever arrived. The door that opened at 3 in the morning in a room with a deadbolt that had a known fault nobody had bothered to fix. And room 4, and the sound from behind its door at 4 in the morning, and the 2 men who had chosen their target from a booking system before he had even packed his bag. No supernatural forces, no ghosts, no things that cannot be explained, just people. In the dark, in rooms full of sleeping strangers, with plans that had been made long before you arrived. If you are planning to travel, if you have a hostel booking coming up, check the lock on your door before you go to sleep. Push something against it if it does not feel solid. Tell someone at home exactly where you are and exactly when they should expect to hear from you. And if you wake in the night to a sound you cannot immediately explain, trust what your body tells you before your mind has a chance to talk you out of it. That instinct is older than language. It has kept people alive for longer than hostels have existed. Listen to it. Like and subscribe for new horror stories every single week. Leave a comment telling me which story you are still thinking about. And if you have your own hostel story, something that felt wrong, something you got out of, something you have never told anyone because it sounds almost too ordinary to explain why it was so terrifying, leave it below. We read every single one. Good night. Sleep well, or try.